The morning Jack left for Mexico, the sun was a pale disk in a sky too blue for my mood. Lily, our 4-year-old whirlwind of curiosity, was still asleep, her small hand clutching the edge of the blanket. Jack was bustling around the bedroom, his suitcase gaping open as he checked his list twice, thrice. "Do you really need to take the big suitcase?" I asked, the edge in my voice sharper than I intended. Jack looked up, his eyes a soft apology. "I know it seems like a lot, but Mom wants to bring back gifts for everyone. It's been ages since the whole family got together like this." I nodded, trying to keep the hurt from showing. "I just wish," my voice trailed off. He crossed the room and wrapped me in a hug. "I wish you and Lily could come too. You know that, right?" Lily chose that moment to toddle into the room, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Daddy, you go on airplane?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. Jack knelt down and took her in his arms. "Yeah, princess. Daddy's going to see the family with Grandma and Grandpa. But I'll bring you a big surprise, okay?" She seemed satisfied with the promise, nestling her head against his shoulder. After Jack left, the house echoed with an unfamiliar silence. Lily played with her toys, unaware of the tension that had seeped into the walls. I was clearing up the breakfast dishes when my phone pinged with the first notification. A hotel booking in Cancun, enough to make my heart skip a beat. I stared at the screen, the numbers glaring back at me. My fingers trembled as I typed out a message to Jack. "Did you just book a hotel on our credit card?" "That's a lot of zeros, Jack." His reply came minutes later. "It's all under control. Marie's handling it. Trust me." But trust was a currency in short supply. As the days passed, each notification was a fresh wound, a tally of experiences we were excluded from. I tried to lose myself in work and in making days fun for Lily, who asked more than once why we couldn't go to the beach with Daddy. The day before they were due back, I sat Lily down for a talk. "Daddy will be home tomorrow. We can show him how well we've managed, just us girls." She nodded, a frown creasing her small forehead. "Will he be happy to see us?" I pulled her into a hug, the weight of my own doubts a heavy cloak. "Very happy," I promised, hoping my words were true. The morning they returned, I stood by the window, watching the driveway. The minivan turned the corner, and my heart raced. 2 weeks felt like 2 months, and the reunion I had imagined was tinged with the residue of betrayal. As the family poured out, laughter and chatter spilling into the quiet morning, I braced myself for the confrontation, for the explanations. But nothing could have prepared me for the truth that was waiting to unravel the knot of misunderstandings between us. The family minivan pulled into the driveway just past noon, its tires crunching over the gravel like the ticking of a clock that had finally wound down. The door burst open, and the cascade of Jack's family spilled out in a riot of color and noise, a stark contrast to the gray quiet that had settled over the house in their absence. Lily pressed her face against the living room window, her hands leaving smudges on the glass. "Mommy, look. They're back." I forced a smile, lifting her into my arms so she could get a better view. "Yes, sweetheart, Daddy's home." But as I watched them, a knot tightened in my stomach. They moved with a peculiar haste, their laughter not reaching their eyes. And then I saw Jack, trailing behind the rest, his face drawn, eyes that once sparkled with mischief, now dull and averted. I set Lily down and stepped outside, the screen door slamming behind me with a finality that made me wince. "Jack," I called, my voice steady, despite the tremor I felt inside. He stopped, his shoulders tensing. Slowly, he turned to face me. "Hey," he said, a word so simple and yet so laden with unspoken tension. "What's going on, Jack? Why does everyone look like they're at a funeral?" My voice cracked, betraying my feigned calmness. Before he could answer, his mother, a sturdy woman with lines of kindness etched into her face, approached me. "Let's go inside, dear. There's a lot to explain." We settled in the living room, a mismatched gathering of in-laws and nieces and nephews, all eyes on me. Jack sat next to me, took my hand, his grip tight. Marie wanted to have one last adventure, with all of us, Jack began, his voice a whisper of its usual strength. She's been sick. Very sick. The room went still, the air heavy, as if everyone was holding their breath. Sick? How sick? I asked, the words a fragile bridge across the chasm that had opened between us. It's terminal, his father said, the stoic man I'd known for years now struggling to keep his voice level. She didn't want the world to shrink to hospital rooms and sympathy. She wanted to live fully until the end. I glanced around the room, at the faces marked with shared grief, and understood the weight of the secret they had carried. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, feeling the sting of exclusion all over again. We wanted to, Jack's sister added, her eyes red-rimmed, but Marie was adamant. She didn't want pity. She wanted this trip to be about joy, not sadness. And the charges? I pressed, the practical side of me needing answers. Jack squeezed my hand. Marie. She insisted. She wanted to make sure you and Lily were part of it, in a way. It was her gift to you both. I struggled to digest it all, the enormity of the situation pressing down on me. A gift, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. Yes, Jack said, his eyes finally meeting mine. She's leaving us with memories, not just bills. She wanted to pay for it all, didn't want to leave any debts behind. I looked down at our intertwined hands, at the man I had loved and raged against in equal measure these past weeks. In that moment, the anger began to ebb, replaced by an aching sorrow for the sister-in-law I barely knew and the family that was grappling with an impending loss. We have pictures, Jack said softly. Marie wanted to document everything, for you, for Lily. When you're ready, we can look at them together. Lily, sensing the shift in the room, came over and climbed into my lap, her small presence a balm to the raw edges of my emotions. Is Daddy sad? She asked, looking up at me with wide, innocent eyes. Just a little, baby. But he's also very happy to see us, I replied, my voice steadier as I wrapped my arms around her. Jack leaned his head against mine, a silent thank you for understanding, for the forgiveness that was beginning to take root amidst the chaos of our upturned lives. The house was quiet, the kind of hush that falls after a storm, when even the world seems to hold its breath. The family had retreated to their respective corners, grappling with the raw edges of Marie's truth, leaving me and Jack sitting side by side on the creaky old couch that had become an unwitting confidant to our family's deepest moments. Jack broke the silence, his voice a strained whisper. I wanted to protect you from this, from the pain of knowing. I turned to him, my heart a tangle of hurt and compassion. But it's our pain to share, isn't it? We're in this together. He nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I know. And I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. The air between us was thick with things unsaid, a decade of shared history that had never been so tested. We need to talk about what this means for us, for Lily, I said, the pragmatic side of me surfacing despite the emotion. We need a plan. Jack reached for a photo album that lay on the coffee table, its pages filled with snapshots of the trip. First, we remember her as she wanted to be remembered, he said, flipping it open. The first photo was of Marie, her head thrown back in laughter, the backdrop a tapestry of wildflowers and blue skies. She looks so alive, I murmured. That's exactly how she wanted to go out, Jack said, tracing the outline of her face with his finger. Alive. The room was silent again, save for the soft crinkling of the album pages as we turned them. Each photo told a story of defiance, of a life being lived to the fullest even as it slipped away. As we neared the end of the album, Jack pulled out an envelope tucked in the back cover. She left this for us, he said, handing it to me. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers, pulling out a letter written in Marie's bold, looping script. Dear family, I read aloud, my voice steady, if you're reading this, it means I'm on my final adventure, one I have to take alone. Jack's hand found mine, his grip grounding me as I continued. I've lived a beautiful life, filled with love and laughter, and I don't want you to mourn for what's lost. Instead, celebrate what we had, and look after each other. That's my final wish. The letter went on, each word a testament to her spirit, to her unyielding desire to leave on her own terms. When I finished, I folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. "We will honor her wish," I said, more to myself than to Jack. "We will," Jack agreed. "And we'll start by living fully, just like she did. For her, for us, for Lily." The conversation that followed was long overdue. We talked about how to explain Marie's condition to Lily, about the support we'd need to navigate the coming months, about how we could honor Marie's memory in our daily lives. And through it all, the revelation that had seemed so daunting at first began to weave itself into the fabric of our family story, not as a tear, but as a patchwork piece that, though different, still held a place of its own. As night fell, and Lily's soft breathing signaled her journey to dreams, Jack and I sat in the dim light, a sense of unity slowly knitting back together the frayed ends of our bond. "We'll get through this," Jack said, his voice a promise in the darkness. "We will," I affirmed, together. And as we turned off the lights and headed to bed, the weight of the revelation was still there, but it felt a little lighter, shared between us, a burden we would carry together, as a family. Days after the revelation, life had settled into a strange new rhythm. There was an undercurrent of sadness in the house, but also a kind of shared strength that hadn't been there before. It was during these days that I began to notice the secret smile that would occasionally cross Jack's face. It was a private, wistful curve of his lips that spoke of memories only he was privy to. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun paint the sky with the colors of Marie's vibrant life, I finally asked, "Jack, what's behind the smile I keep seeing?" He looked at me, the twilight casting shadows across his face. "It's Marie," he admitted. She made me promise to keep some things just between us. Little jokes, stories, her way of making sure part of her stayed with me alone. I felt a pang of jealousy, but it was quickly softened by understanding. "Can you share one with me?" "Just one," I pleaded softly. He pondered for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, one story. Did you know, on the trip, she convinced everyone to call me Capitan because I was so terrible at reading the map? She said I was leading the expedition to nowhere." I laughed, the sound mingling with the crickets' evening chorus. "That sounds like her," I said, picturing the scene in my mind. "Thank you for sharing that with me." Jack's hand found mine, and we sat in silence for a while, lost in our thoughts. The days that followed were a mixture of light and shadow. In the mornings, I'd often catch Jack looking at old photos or staring into the distance, his mind clearly miles away. But he was present, too, playing with Lily, helping around the house, talking about Marie in ways that made her feel close again. One afternoon, while Lily napped, I found Jack in the garage, rummaging through a box labeled Mexico. "What are you looking for?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. He didn't look up. "Marie gave me something, a sort of, well, it's silly, but it meant a lot." Curiosity piqued, I watched as he pulled out a small, hand-painted maraca. "She gave this to me the first night. Told me whenever I miss her, I should give it a shake and she'd be right there, causing a ruckus with me." It was so like Marie to find humor in the face of her reality. I walked over and took the maraca, giving it a gentle shake. The sound was cheerful, a stark contrast to the quiet that had settled over us. "You know, she left us all something," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "She left us the gift of remembering her joy, her rebellion against sorrow." I handed the maraca back to him. "And we'll keep her memory alive every day," I promised. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, Lily asked about the maraca. Jack told her a story about her Aunt Marie, a tale full of laughter and silliness, and for the first time in weeks, our home was filled with the echo of joy. After Lily's bedtime, Jack and I lingered at the table, the maraca sitting between us. "Marie was right, you know," Jack said, picking it up and shaking it lightly. "She's still here, in the laughter, in the stories, in this." I reached out and stilled his hand, holding it and the maraca in mine. "And she's here," I said, placing my other hand over his heart. "Always." Jack's eyes met mine, and there it was again, the secret smile. But this time I understood. It was a smile of shared memories, of love that didn't end with a goodbye. We sat there, hands entwined, the maraca a bridge between the past and present, between sorrow and the smiles that would come, secret no more. The legacy of Marie was not something that could be touched or held, but rather felt and lived. It was in the way the morning light would spill through the curtains, in the warmth of a shared glance, in the echoes of laughter that still hung in the corners of the rooms. The house had become a living monument to her spirit, and every day we found new ways to honor her memory. Jack had started a project in the backyard, something he said Marie had always wanted. A garden, vibrant and wild, much like she had been. We spent hours there, our hands in the dirt, planting and nurturing life, as if in doing so, we were somehow keeping a piece of her alive. "I want to plant sunflowers," Lily declared one afternoon as we stood surveying the garden. Aunt Marie loved them. Jack knelt beside her, a tender smile touching his lips. "Then sunflowers we shall plant, my little gardener." A whole row of them, standing tall and bright, just like her. Lily clapped her hands with delight, and I watched them, feeling a swell of love for this family that had been through so much. As the days turned into weeks, the garden began to flourish, each plant a testament to the life we were determined to celebrate. The sunflowers grew tallest, their golden heads swaying in the breeze, as if nodding along to the laughter that now came more easily. One evening, as we sat on the porch, our hands stained with earth and the scent of flowers in the air, Jack spoke of Marie's legacy. "Do you think she'd be proud of what we're doing?" he asked, his eyes searching mine for affirmation. I reached out, taking his hand in mine. "I know she would. We're not just growing a garden, Jack. We're growing hope, and that was what Marie was all about." Jack's gaze turned towards the garden, watching as the last rays of the sun danced over the petals and leaves. "She wanted to make a difference, leave a mark. I think this garden, it's a start." "It's more than a start," I countered gently. "It's a continuation. Her passion, her vitality, it's all around us. We're living her legacy, not just remembering it." Jack nodded slowly, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I just wish she could see it." "She can," I said firmly. "She sees it through us, through Lily, through every person whose life she touched. And this," I gestured to the garden, "this is just one way we keep her with us." We sat in silence then, watching as the twilight crept over the garden, turning it into a silhouette of dreams and memories. It was in that peaceful moment that I knew Marie's legacy was not just about what we created in her name, but how we lived because of her influence. "You're right," Jack said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Her legacy is in every choice we make, every laugh we share, every memory we hold on to. And in this garden, it's like she's still here, growing alongside us." I squeezed his hand, my heart full. "Always," I agreed. "Her spirit is the lifeblood of this place." As night settled around us, the garden became a shadowy oasis where the past met the present, and hope bloomed in the fertile ground of a legacy that would never die. It was a legacy of love, laughter, and the unwavering courage to keep going, no matter what. And as we stood up to go inside, I knew that with every sunrise, with every bloom that opened to the sky, Marie would be smiling down on us, her legacy secure in the hands of those who loved her most. In the wake of Marie's passing, the concept of wealth had been irrevocably altered for Jack and Lily. Where once there might have been aspirations for material gain, now there was a profound understanding that the truest form of wealth was found in the moments they shared and the love that bound them together. It was a lesson hard learned, but one that had become the foundation of their existence. The 6th chapter opens with a scene that perfectly encapsulates this new philosophy. Jack is seen sitting at the kitchen table, his brows furrowed over a sea of bills and papers. Lily is painting at her easel nearby, her strokes bold and confident. "Daddy, why do you look so sad?" Lily's voice cuts through the silence, innocent and concerned. Jack looks up, his face softening. "I'm not sad, pumpkin. Just thinking about grown-up things." "Like money?" she asks, her paintbrush pausing in midair. "Yes, like money," he admits, sigh escaping his lips. Lily puts down her brush and walks over, her small hand finding his. Aunt Marie said that love is the best kind of wealth. Do we have that? Jack's eyes meet hers, and there is a wealth of emotion in that gaze. Oh, Lily. We have that in spades. They share a smile, and it's a poignant reminder of Marie's enduring wisdom. The narrative then follows Jack as he navigates the complexities of his new life, the financial strain made bearable by the outpouring of support from the community. Friends and neighbors, many touched by Marie's generosity in the past, come forward with acts of kindness. There are home-cooked meals, offers to babysit Lily, and even anonymous donations. One evening, as Jack is tucking Lily into bed, she murmurs sleepily, "Everyone loves us so much, Daddy. Is it because we're rich with love?" Jack, who is perched on the edge of her bed, brushes a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "Yes, my dear. Love has a way of multiplying. The more you give, the more you have." But Aunt Marie gave all her love away. Why isn't she here to get it back? Lily's question is a whisper against the quiet of the room. Jack takes a deep breath, his heart aching with the weight of her inquiry. Sometimes love is like a boomerang. It doesn't come back in the way we expect. Aunt Marie's love is coming back to us through all the people she cared for. And that's a kind of magic that never ends. Lily nods, her eyes fluttering closed, a contented smile playing on her lips. "Magic love," she whispers. "I like that." The chapter closes with Jack sitting on the porch, the stars twinkling above him as he reflects on the journey so far. A neighbor, Mr. Wilson, joins him, and they talk about the community, the garden, and Marie's lasting impact. "Jack, you've got something special here," Mr. Wilson says, his voice gruff with emotion. "You and Lily, you've got the kind of wealth that money can't buy." Jack nods, his gaze on the garden where the shadows play. "I'm beginning to realize that. And I'm grateful for it every single day." They sit in companionable silence, the night around them a testament to the enduring power of love. It's clear that while Marie may be gone, the wealth of love she left behind continues to grow and sustain those she left behind. The legacy is not just in the tangible, but in the connections and the community that thrive in the space where her memory lives on. The scent of salt and the soft murmur of waves had always been the backdrop of my life in the coastal town. My cottage, a charming structure of stone and wood, was the embodiment of my grandmother's love for the sea and her spirit for independence. Here, I poured my heart into marine research, and it was here that Ethan, with his tousled hair and laughter that echoed the playful dolphins, asked me to be his partner in life's great dance. Ethan's words, "Will you marry me, Julia, and share this dance forever," still echoed in my heart as the most harmonious melody I'd ever heard. Our wedding was a misty morning affair, the sea's mist kissing our cheeks as we exchanged vows. Life seemed to be in perpetual bloom, much like the roses that climbed the walls of our cottage. But as the years drifted by, the tides of change began to stir. Ethan's once passionate embrace grew distracted, his mind often lost in the worlds he spun in his books. My silent companion, the sea, witnessed the subtle shifts, the soft withdrawal of his hand from mine as the seasons cycled. One evening, as the autumn leaves began their descent, Ethan's parents arrived, their faces etched with lines of worry deeper than the trenches I studied. Their home, once a fortress against uncertainties, had been claimed by an unforgiving economic tide. "Julia, my dear, we have nowhere else to go," Ethan's mother whispered, her voice a brittle leaf in the wind. His father, a stoic man, stood silent, his eyes pleading. Ethan, looking to me with hope and desperation, said, "They just need a place to weather this storm, just for a little while. Can we offer them our home?" How could I say no? This was family, and family meant anchoring each other against the capricious seas of fate. So, I nodded, and our home became theirs. Days stretched into weeks as Ethan's parents settled into a routine that clashed with the rhythm of our life. The study, my sanctuary where I'd lose myself in the mysteries of the ocean's depths, became their room. My meticulous notes and delicate samples were packed away to make space for their belongings. "You don't mind, do you, Julia?" Ethan asked one day, as we shuffled my research into boxes. It's just until they get back on their feet." His words were meant to be reassuring, but they felt like anchors tying me down. My sanctuary was slipping away, and with it, the essence of who I was. "I don't mind," I lied, forcing a smile as I sealed another box, a small piece of myself tucked away with my research. I turned to look out the window, where the horizon blurred into the sea, wondering when the tide would turn in my favor once again. The rhythm of the coastal town was like the heartbeat of the earth, slow, steady, and serene. That serenity was the soul of my cottage, which stood as a silent sentinel by the sea, guarding the secrets of the deep I sought to unravel. My life with Ethan, interwoven with the tranquil passage of days, was a soothing sonnet until the day the uninvited storm swept into our lives. It was a gusty autumn evening, the kind that whispered of coming change. The sunset was ablaze with fierce oranges and reds, a fiery omen to the turmoil that was about to unfold. Ethan's parents arrived on our doorstep, their faces shadowed not just by the failing light but by the gloom of their plight. "Julia, we've hit a rough patch," Ethan's father said, his voice as rough as the storm-worn cliffs. His hands, once strong and steady, trembled like fragile leaves. "We need a haven, just for a short spell," his mother added, her eyes brimming with the storm of her sorrow. "Could we impose upon your good graces?" I felt Ethan's eyes on me, wide and imploring. The gravity of the situation was as heavy as the anchor on my favorite necklace, the one he had given me on our first anniversary. "Of course," I replied, the words hollow as they bounced off the walls of my sanctuary. "Your family. Our home is your shelter." The gratitude in their eyes was immediate and intense, like the sudden calm after a storm. But the calm was deceptive, for their arrival was not the eye of the storm, but the harbinger of chaos. As night fell and the cottage braced for the intrusion, I found myself in the garden, seeking counsel from the ancient roses. The thorns, sharp and protective, seemed to echo my thoughts. "Julia, you're not having second thoughts, are you?" Ethan's voice broke through my reverie as he joined me under the starlit sky. I turned to him, searching his face for the man who had once understood my every silent thought. "I'm worried, Ethan. Our life is not built for such disruptions." He took my hands in his, the warmth familiar yet distant. "They're family, love. We must weather this storm together. It's just for a little while, I promise." His reassurance was meant to be a lighthouse in the fog, but I could only see the encroaching darkness. The storm had arrived, uninvited, and I could not foresee its passing. Back inside, as we made room for the newcomers, the cottage seemed to shrink, its walls closing in on me. My study, once my temple of discovery, was stripped of its identity, each artifact of my research a reminder of the life I was now packing away. The storm had breached the walls of my sanctuary, and as I watched Ethan's parents nestling into the heart of my home, a sense of foreboding settled over me. The cottage, Ethan, and I were now at the mercy of an uninvited storm, and I could not help but wonder if we would ever find our way back to the serenity we once knew. As the days unfolded into a tapestry of awkward cohabitation, my cottage, the keeper of my solitude and scholarly pursuits, began to transform. The familiar scent of salt and old books mingled with unfamiliar aromas of Ethan's parents' cooking and the heavy cologne his father wore. Our once spacious living room, adorned with seashells and driftwood sculptures, now hosted his mother's porcelain figurines and gaudy tapestries that clashed with the soft, natural palette of the seaside. One morning, while attempting to prepare breakfast in the now cramped kitchen, I accidentally knocked over a newly placed spice rack, a gift from Ethan's aunt. The clattering sound as it hit the floor echoed my inner turmoil. "Oh, Julia, do be careful," Ethan's mother chided from the kitchen table, her voice sharp as the shards of glass at my feet. "These are family heirlooms, not some sea pebbles you can just sweep away." I bit back a retort, crouching to clean the mess, feeling the sting of her words more than the prick of the glass. "I'm sorry, Marianne." "It was an accident," I said, keeping my voice as calm as the eye of a storm. Ethan, entering the kitchen with a furrowed brow, surveyed the scene. "Julia, what happened? Are you okay?" I looked up at him, the frustration clear in my eyes. "I'm fine, Ethan. Just a bit crowded in here, that's all." He knelt beside me, helping to gather the spices. I know it's been hard. They're trying to find their footing. We just need to give them a little more time. I wanted to scream, to tell him that with every passing day, I felt more like a castaway on my own shore, but I swallowed the growing lump in my throat. Yes, time, I murmured, unsure whether I was referring to the time they needed or the time I had already lost. Weeks morphed into months, and the once inviting spaces of my cottage became foreign ground. My study, a sanctuary where I had spent countless hours engrossed in marine research, was now Ethan's parents' bedroom, the bed where they slept a mere arm's length from my cherished desk. One evening, as I tried to work on my latest paper amidst the cacophony of the television from the next room, Ethan's father leaned into the doorway of the study. "Julia, would you mind turning down that lamp? We're trying to watch our show." The request was simple, but it stripped away the last semblance of my domain. I looked up at him, the lamp's glow casting shadows on my work, the work that was the essence of my being. "Of course, David," I said, voice barely above a whisper, as I reached for the switch, darkness descending upon my world. That night, as I lay in bed, the sound of the ocean's waves crashing against the shore was a cruel reminder of the shore of my life that was vanishing before my eyes. The tide was going out, taking pieces of me with it, and I lay there, feeling as helpless as a beached starfish, longing for the sea to carry me back to where I belonged. The relentless march of time brought neither solace nor departure for Ethan's parents. Instead, my cottage became more entrenched in their presence, every corner echoing their occupancy. Ethan, once attuned to the subtle shifts of my moods, now navigated around his parents with a strained politeness that hung heavy in the air. It was on a particularly overcast day, with the sky mirroring the tumultuous sea within me, that Ethan approached with a hesitation that belied the gravity of his words. The kitchen, once my laboratory of culinary experiments, now bore the marks of his mother's reign. "Julia, can we talk?" Ethan's voice held a tremor that I hadn't heard before. I paused, my hands wet from the dishes I was washing, sensing the foreboding ripple of an incoming tide. "Of course, what is it?" He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the floor as if searching for words among the tiles. "My parents, they need more time to sort things out. The market is tough, and well." "And?" I prodded, a knot forming in my stomach. Ethan met my eyes, and there it was, the rogue wave in his pleading look. "They've asked if you could stay with your sister for a while. Just until they find a new place." The suggestion struck with the force of a tidal wave, leaving me floundering in disbelief. My voice was steady, though, as I replied, "You want me to leave my own home, Ethan?" He reached out, but I stepped back, the soapy water dripping from my fingertips a physical reminder of the mess this situation had become. "It's not what I want, but what they need, Julia. It's temporary, just for a little while." The words "temporary" and "a little while" had become as meaningless as a broken buoy adrift at sea. "Temporary seems to be a relative term these days," I retorted, the sting of betrayal lacing my words. Ethan ran his fingers through his hair, a gesture of frustration I knew all too well. "I know this is hard to ask, but they're my parents. We need to help them. And what about me, Ethan? Where do I fit into this equation of familial duty?" My voice was rising now, the storm within me breaking free. He looked pained, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the situation was too much to bear. "You are my wife, Julia. You're part of this family. I thought you understood the meaning of sacrifice." The word sacrifice echoed mockingly around the room. I realized then that my silence had been my acquiescence all along, my compliance mistaken for approval. "I understand sacrifice, Ethan, but I never agreed to be the one always making it," I said, my resolve hardening like the coastal cliffs. In that moment, I understood that a rogue wave had not only hit but had been building all along, and now, it threatened to wash away everything I held dear. The foundation of our marriage was being eroded by the very family it was supposed to shelter. As Ethan stood there, looking as lost as a ship in a maelstrom, I knew that the next choice I made would either anchor me to this spot or set me adrift in search of new horizons. The rogue wave had hit, and in its wake, I would have to find my footing or be swept away forever. The cottage, once a vessel of cherished memories and scientific discovery, was now submerged in an undercurrent of tension and unspoken regrets. The relentless presence of Ethan's family, like an invasive species, altered the delicate ecosystem of our home. Ethan's plea for me to vacate my sanctuary had become the catalyst for a revelation, a hidden current that had been stirring beneath the surface of my compliance. It was amidst this turmoil that I found myself in the attic one afternoon, seeking refuge among the relics of my past. The attic, with its dust-laden beams and musty scent, held the remnants of generations. There, tucked away in an old steamer trunk filled with my grandmother's possessions, I discovered a collection of documents yellowed with age. As I sifted through them, the musty air seemed to thicken with the gravity of my find. The papers, penned in my grandmother's elegant script, were like a beacon from the past. They spoke of the cottage and its lineage, of its intention as a place of solace for the women in our family. I was poring over the legalities when Ethan found me, the dim light casting long shadows across the attic. "What are you doing up here, Julia?" His voice was soft, tinged with concern. I looked up, the weight of the papers in my hand grounding me as I met his gaze. "Discovering the truth," I said, my voice a mere whisper, but resolute. Ethan crossed the attic to sit beside me, his eyes scanning the documents now spread between us. "What truth?" "These papers," I began, my fingers tracing the faded ink, "state that my grandmother left the cottage to me, and only me. It was meant to be a sanctuary, Ethan. For me. For us. But not for an indefinite family occupation." Ethan's face paled as he absorbed the words, the implications as clear as the coastal waters on a calm day. "Julia, I had no idea." There was a silence then, filled only by the creaking of the old house and the distant call of seagulls. "I've been adrift, Ethan, in my own home," I continued, the hidden current of my words now surfacing. "I've been silent, but no longer. It's time to reclaim what is rightfully mine." Ethan reached out, his hand hovering over the papers as if to touch them would solidify their reality. "What do you want to do?" I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs like a sail catching the wind. "I want my home back, Ethan. I want our life back. And that means your parents need to find another place to live." He nodded slowly, the crestfallen look in his eyes telling me he understood the magnitude of what I was saying. "I'll talk to them," he said, finally touching the paper, a symbolic gesture of acceptance. "I'll make this right." As I watched him descend the attic stairs, the papers clutched in his hand, I felt the tide within me shift. The hidden current had been revealed, and with it, a newfound strength surged through me. I was the keeper of the cottage, the custodian of my own fate. And it was time for the tides to change. As the sun cast its golden net over the horizon, the cottage seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the change in the tides. The walls, once suffocating in their closeness, now stood firm around me, protectors of the legacy my grandmother had entrusted to me. The aged papers from the attic lay on the table before me, their power palpable in the silence of the early morning. I was sipping my tea when Ethan walked in, his face etched with the lines of difficult conversations had and decisions made. "Julia, I've spoken with them," he began, his voice a mix of resolve and sadness. "And?" I pressed, setting down my cup, its clink of punctuation in the stillness. "They'll leave," he said simply. "They understand that this was never meant to be a permanent solution. I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner." I felt a release then, a loosening of the knot that had tightened in my chest over these past months. "Thank you, Ethan. It means more than you know." He sat across from me, his eyes searching mine. "What will we do now, Julia? Where do we go from here?" I reached for his hand, feeling the familiar warmth that once promised forever. "We start anew, Ethan. We chart a new course, together. But we also set boundaries, for us, for our sanctuary." Ethan nodded, squeezing my hand in his. "I want that. I want us to go back to the way things were, to find our way back to each other." I smiled, the gesture tinged with the melancholy of lessons learned. We can never go back, Ethan. But we can move forward, wiser and more aware of the currents that run beneath the surface. In the days that followed, the cottage slowly shed the remnants of its unwanted occupants. Ethan's parents, with subdued farewell, embarked on their own journey to an uncertain future. And as the door closed behind them, the cottage seemed to exhale, the air lighter and filled with the promise of reclaimed dreams. The roses outside bloomed with a vigor as if in celebration of the renewal within. Ethan and I spent our days restoring the cottage to its former glory, each brushstroke and rearranged piece of furniture an act of healing. One evening, as we sat in the garden, the sea whispering secrets to the shore, Ethan turned to me, a glimmer of the old mischief in his eyes. Julia, do you think the tides are with us? I leaned into him, my head resting on his shoulder. They are, Ethan. As long as we respect their ebb and flow, as long as we swim together with the currents and not against them. And there, with the setting sun casting a soft glow over our little haven, we began to chart our new course. The cottage, with its ivy-clad walls and ocean views, stood as a testament to the strength of one woman's resolve and the enduring power of love. It was a beacon, a lighthouse guiding us through the misty waters of life, and as the stars began to sprinkle the sky with their silver light, I knew that we would navigate this journey with grace and fortitude. For I was the ocean's daughter, and this was my shore. The drive to the Hawthorne estate felt longer than usual, with the towering gates appearing to loom over us as if to say, "You don't belong." Michael squeezed my hand, a silent reassurance that seemed to dissipate as quickly as it came when we crossed the threshold. The grand hall was steeped in the silence of anticipation, a prelude to the storm I knew was coming. The family's portraits glared down from their gilded frames, witnesses to the countless dramas that had unfolded beneath them. Michael's aunt, a woman with a hawk-like gaze, was the first to break the silence. "Emma, dear, how lovely to see you've made an effort today," her voice dripped with a condescension that could erode steel. I offered her a smile, one that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Aunt Lydia, it's always a pleasure to see you as well." The words were polite, but we both knew the dance of niceties was just a veneer over old wounds. The clock chimed, a harbinger of the moment we were all dreading. Patricia swept into the room, the matriarch in full command of her court. The air seemed to thin, making it hard to breathe. "Family," she began, her voice cutting through the murmurs, "we are at a crossroads." Her eyes, like flint, sparked as they landed on me. "It's time to address the elephant in the room." Michael, ever the peacemaker, intervened. "Mother, please, let's be civil. Emma is—" "Silence, Michael," Patricia interjected sharply. "I will not be lectured on civility in my own home." She turned to the gathered kin. "Emma, she will never be one of us. Her presence is an affront to the Hawthorne name." The words were a slap, echoing off the walls, resonating with years of veiled slights and open hostility. I felt Michael's hand tense in mine, his own battle between filial duty and marital loyalty playing across his face. "I understand," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "If that is your wish." I reached into my purse, the leather crackling under my fingers. The paper felt heavy as lead as I unfolded it, each crease a testament to the weight of its contents. "This is a letter from Charles, your husband, my father-in-law." I began to read, the script a stark contrast to the opulence around us. "In my twilight years, I've come to realize that wealth and blood are poor substitutes for love and kindness," I read aloud, the words resonating in the hush of the hall. Patricia's face turned a shade paler, her poise faltering for a moment. "That's impossible. Charles would never." The letter continued, weaving a tale of regret and a plea for the future, a future where warmth and acceptance held more value than the cold currency of old money. As the final words hung in the air, a profound shift permeated the room. It wasn't triumph that swelled within me, but a profound sadness for the woman who stood, pale and shaken, her fortress of solitude crumbling around her. The storm had broken, and in its wake, the possibility of a new beginning whispered through the grand hall, waiting to be seized. The letter fluttered slightly in my grip, as if the words penned upon it yearned to escape into the air of the grand hall. The family, an assembly of finely dressed aristocracy, watched with bated breath, a collective statue carved from generations of privilege and expectation. Patricia, her complexion now a ghostly white, stood rooted to the spot. Her eyes, usually so commanding and sharp, flickered with an uncharacteristic vulnerability. Charles's words, I began again, the script of the letter curving and flowing like the rivers that ran through the Hawthorne lands, speak of a legacy beyond wealth. A legacy he wished to be defined by the bonds we choose to forge, not those dictated by mere circumstance. The air was thick with the unspoken thoughts of everyone present. Each person seemed to grapple with the gravity of the patriarch's concealed reflections. Michael's cousin, James, a tall man with a perennially furrowed brow, broke the silence. What does this mean for us, then? For the estate? His voice, although measured, betrayed a hint of the same anxiety that held the room in its grip. Patricia's lips parted, but no sound emerged. She appeared smaller somehow, less the imperious matriarch and more a woman confronted with her own fragility. The letter continued, It is my final wish that the estate, the holdings, and all that constitutes the Hawthorne legacy be shared. Shared not only amongst those of my blood but also with those who have shown a capacity for kindness, for compassion, and for love. A collective gasp rose from the assembled kin, a murmur like the rustling of autumn leaves. You can't possibly be suggesting. Patricia's voice finally found its way out, a mere whisper, that Emma and Michael. I nodded, meeting her gaze steadily. Yes, Patricia. Charles appointed Michael and me as custodians of his legacy, jointly. The words seemed to hover in the room, an impossible truth made manifest. But how could he? Without consulting me? Patricia's facade of control was crumbling, her voice shaking. The will was witnessed by Mr. Thompson, the family lawyer, and notarized in accordance with the law, I added, the practicality of the statement landing heavily in the room. Patricia's gaze shifted to the paper in my hand as if it were a lifeline that could anchor her back to reality. May I? She asked, extending a trembling hand. I handed her the letter, and as she read, her demeanor softened. The words of her late husband seemed to reach into her, soothing the sharp edges of her pride. Charles always did have a soft spot for the underdog, she said, almost to herself. The room remained silent, the family watching as the matriarch grappled with the unveiling of a legacy rewritten. Michael stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. Mother, this isn't the end. It's an opportunity to honor Father's true wishes, to bring the family together in a way that we've never been before. Patricia looked up from the letter, her eyes searching her son's face, perhaps looking for the boy she once knew, the boy before the man who stood with his chosen partner against tradition. The chapter closed, not with the slamming of a book, but with the turning of a page. The legacy unveiled was not just of lands and titles, but of humanity and hope, a hope that the Hawthorne name could signify something warmer, something kinder, than it ever had before. The silence that followed Michael's plea was deafening, the sort that spoke volumes in its emptiness. The grandeur of the Hawthorne estate seemed suddenly oppressive, as if the very walls were closing in, built brick by brick from the pride and prejudice of generations past. Patricia's eyes lingered on her son, the fortress of her resolve showing cracks. Michael, she began, her voice a fragile echo of the commanding tone she had used earlier, your father was a dreamer, always was. But this? She waved a hand over the letter as if to dispel the words written upon it. I stepped closer, feeling the divide between us like a chasm. Patricia, I said, my voice softer now, these walls you built around yourself, around us, they were never what Charles wanted. Her gaze met mine, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the flicker of something raw, something human. And what would you know of what my Charles wanted? The question was sharp, but the malice had dulled. Only what he shared in his final days, I replied, holding her stare. He spoke of regret, of time lost, and love withheld. Aunt Lydia, who had been silent until now, chimed in with a disapproving TSK. Love is a luxury not everyone can afford, Emma. We Hawthorns have duties, responsibilities to our name. But isn't love the greatest responsibility of all? I countered, feeling the weight of the room's attention upon me. What use is a name, a legacy, if it's void of love? Michael nodded, his support unwavering. Mother, Emma's right. We have a chance to rebuild, not just the estate, but our family. To create something stronger, something real. Patricia looked from me to Michael, her expression warring between indignation and introspection. And what of tradition? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried, heavy with the weight of centuries. Tradition, Michael paused, searching for the right words, is the foundation upon which we stand, but we decide how to shape the home atop it. There was a pause, a collective breath held as the matriarch of the Hawthorne family contemplated the ruins of the walls she had so meticulously maintained. It was your strength that held this family together after Charles passed, I said, acknowledging her in a way I never had before. But maybe it's time for a different kind of strength. Patricia's eyes searched the faces around her, each one reflecting a spectrum of emotion, hope, skepticism, curiosity. Then, slowly, a transformation began. The rigidity in her posture eased, and the harsh lines of her countenance softened. Perhaps, she began, her voice a tentative truce, it is time for a new chapter. One not written by the expectations of our forebears, but by us, here, now. A murmur of agreement rippled through the relatives, like a breeze through leaves, signifying the beginning of change. As the chapter titled "The Walls We Build" drew to a close, it was not with the crumbling of stone or the tearing down of barricades, but with the acknowledgement that the strongest walls are the ones we choose to take down ourselves. In that grand hall, amid the opulence and history of the Hawthorne name, a family began the slow, challenging work of dismantling barriers that had long divided them. As the echo of Patricia's reluctant concession faded, the room seemed to inhale deeply, the atmosphere thick with the scent of old wood and the faintest hint of change. The ancestors, peering down from their oil-painted perches, appeared less stern, their eyes no longer seeming to guard old secrets, but perhaps to encourage new beginnings. Emma felt the subtle shift, like the first crack in a long frozen lake, promising the thaw of spring. Michael, sensing the change, stepped forward, his voice carrying the tentative hope of the newly betrothed. Mother, he began, his hand finding Emma's, perhaps it's time we all took a step. A step towards understanding, towards the family that father envisioned. Patricia, her back still a portrait of regality, allowed a moment of silence before responding. And what would that look like, Michael? Her question was not mocking, but genuinely inquisitive, a flicker of curiosity behind her steely veneer. It would look like us, all of us, finding common ground, Michael said, his gaze sweeping across the room, meeting the eyes of aunts, uncles, cousins who had been mere silhouettes in his life. Emma's voice joined the chorus, steady and clear. It would look like conversations, not confrontations. Like gatherings where every voice is heard, not just the loudest. From the corner, a voice piped up, Uncle Harold, always the skeptic. Words are well and good, but how do we start? Old wounds don't heal by pretty speeches. Emma turned to face him, her resolve shining. We start with truth, Uncle. We acknowledge the hurt, the pride, the misunderstandings. We accept that rebuilding takes time. Patricia, who had been a silent observer, now interjected, her tone reflective. I built walls so high, I've nearly forgotten the view from the ground. Your father saw the world from the heart, not the height. The room held its breath, as if the house itself waited for what would come next. Michael, with a diplomat's grace, approached his mother. Then let's lower the drawbridge, Mother. Let's open the gates we've closed, not just to Emma, but to the possibilities of what we can be. The first crack had appeared, a sliver of light in the once impregnable fortress of Hawthorne pride. And as if on cue, the grandfather clock chimed, a sonorous bell that seemed to mark not the hour, but the moment. Patricia exhaled, a sound so laden with years of tension that it seemed to carry the dust of the past with it. I will try, she conceded, her voice quivering with the magnitude of the admission. For your father, for the family. And with those words, the first crack widened, allowing the light of change to spill forth, illuminating faces that had been long accustomed to the dim of tradition. The chapter titled "The First Crack" was not an end, but a beginning, a narrative unfolding with the promise that change, though wrought with uncertainty, was indeed possible. The once imposing grandeur of the Hawthorne estate seemed less daunting now, as if the very bricks and mortar had absorbed the family's cautious optimism. The morning after the revealing of the will, the manor was alive with a rare sound, the murmurs of a family not in discord, but in dialogue. In the sunlit conservatory, where ivy caressed the glass like tender fingers, Emma found Patricia alone, a sight so uncommon it gave her pause. The matriarch was examining a rose, its crimson bloom defiant in the midst of winter. "You know," Patricia started, her voice softer, without losing its familiar timbre, "Charles loved these roses. Said they reminded him of life, beautiful, yet thorny." Emma approached, her footsteps echoing lightly on the tile. "It's a good reminder," she replied. "Beauty often comes with its share of thorns." Patricia glanced up, offering a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, but was genuine nonetheless. "You have thorns too, Emma. You've needed them, I suppose." "I've had to," Emma confessed, allowing a vulnerability she had never shown to Patricia. "Especially within these walls." Patricia turned away from the roses, facing Emma fully. "I've been thinking about foundations," she mused, "about what we lay at the base of everything we build. I built on expectations, on rigid tradition. But Charles, he wanted to build on something more, enduring." "Love," Emma said simply, and Patricia nodded. "Yes, love. And respect," she added. "I may not understand all of Charles's wishes yet, but I do know that without respect, our foundation will crumble, regardless of our good intentions." Emma moved closer, a silent truce forming in the space between them. "We can lay a new foundation, Patricia. One that includes all of us. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it." Patricia looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. "And where do we start with this new foundation?" "With honesty," Emma suggested. "And perhaps, with a family breakfast. Something informal, just a chance for everyone to talk." Patricia considered this, then nodded slowly. "I'll have the staff prepare something in the kitchen, no grand dining hall, no silver service." "That sounds perfect," Emma agreed, a smile blossoming on her face, mirroring the roses around them. As they left the conservatory together, the sound of their shared laughter mingled with the fragrance of the blooms, a testament to the new foundation being laid, one conversation, one shared moment at a time. The chapter titled "A New Foundation" was both an end and a beginning, the closing of a book of old grievances and the opening of a new volume filled with blank pages, ready to be inscribed with the narrative of a family reborn. The air was crisp as dawn broke over the Hawthorne estate, its golden light seeping through the ancient trees and into the windows of the manor, painting the walls with the promise of a new day. It was in this gentle morning glow that the family gathered in the kitchen, a place usually reserved for staff, now a symbol of unity as they embarked on crafting a new chapter together. Emma, with a steaming pot of coffee, played hostess, an unfamiliar role within these walls, while Michael flipped pancakes, his sleeves rolled up, a look of concentration on his face that was usually reserved for the boardroom. The scene was domestic, disarmingly normal, and that normality was revolutionary. Patricia, perched on a stool by the marble island, watched the scene unfold with an unreadable expression. "I can't recall the last time we used this kitchen for anything other than staff meetings," she commented, her voice tinged with a mix of wonder and apprehension. "It's the heart of the home," Emma replied, passing her a cup of coffee. "It seems fitting that we start here." Michael slid a stack of golden brown pancakes onto a plate and set them in the center of the island. "Let's make it a tradition," he suggested, meeting his mother's gaze. Patricia accepted the mug, cradling it in her hands as if it were a delicate peace offering. "A tradition of togetherness," she mused, the words feeling foreign yet hopeful on her tongue. The rest of the family filtered in, drawn by the aroma of breakfast and the novelty of the gathering. Each face reflected a unique blend of curiosity and cautious optimism. Uncle Harold, ever the voice of skepticism, grumbled as he took his seat. Well, I never thought I'd see the day when the Hawthorns would dine in the kitchen like a family? Emma finished for him, a gentle nudge in the direction of the new reality they were all facing. Harold's gruff exterior softened, a rare smile breaking through. Yes, like a family, he conceded. As they ate, the kitchen filled with conversation, a symphony of shared stories, tentative laughter, and the clinking of utensils on plates. It was a symphony long absent from the halls of Hawthorne. Patricia, observing the interactions, felt a stirring within her, a mixture of regret for the years lost and a flicker of hope for the years yet to come. I suppose Charles was right, she admitted quietly to Emma. The foundation of family isn't in the name, but in the moments we share. Emma nodded, her eyes meeting Patricia's. And every moment is a chance to build something stronger. This is just the beginning, an ellipsis leading to the next sentence in our story. As breakfast came to an end, the family lingered, not yet ready to disperse to their separate corners of the estate. The walls that had once seemed to confine them now felt like a protective embrace, sheltering the delicate shoots of reconciliation. The chapter titled Ellipsis was not an ending, but a continuation. An acknowledgement that the story of the Hawthorns was still being written, its narrative arc bending towards healing and unity. The ellipsis symbolized the potential of what was yet to come, an unfinished sentence waiting to be completed with patience, understanding, and love. Clara nestled deeper into the plush cushions of her favorite armchair, a delicate china cup cradled between her hands. The rich aroma of the coffee seemed to blend seamlessly with the cinnamon and apple that wafted from the kitchen, where her mother-in-law, Madeline, stood as a conductor over her symphony of baking. The cozy living room, with its walls lined with bookshelves and photographs of smiling faces, wrapped around her like a warm embrace. Outside, the autumn leaves rustled as if sharing secrets in hushed tones, a prelude to the coming winter. Clara's gaze shifted to the two figures across the room. Mark, her husband of 3 years, and his mother, Madeline, were huddled together, their conversation a murmur against the crackling of the fireplace. "You've outdone yourself with the tarts this year, Maman," Mark said, his voice a soft baritone that resonated with affection. Madeline chuckled, "It's the apples. They were particularly sweet this season. Just like the surprise we have for Clara." Clara pretended to be lost in her book, but her attention was fixed on their clandestine exchange. She had learned French as a love letter to Mark's heritage, but they had never suspected how fluent she had become. "The plan is set for tomorrow," Mark continued, his words cloaked in mystery. Madeline leaned in closer, her voice a whisper, "It will be the surprise of a lifetime." She suspects nothing. The threads of intrigue wound tighter around Clara's heart. What plan could they be discussing? What surprise could they be concocting without her knowledge? A flutter of anxiety danced in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral, turning a page of her book with feigned indifference. Later, as twilight painted the sky with shades of orange and purple, Clara sat at the dinner table, the image of composure. Madeline served the apple tarts, their sweet scent a contrast to the savory meal they had just enjoyed. "So, what are your plans for tomorrow?" Clara ventured, her voice casual. Mark and Madeline exchanged a glance. "Oh, just a small family outing." "Nothing too extravagant," Mark replied, his eyes gleaming with unspoken stories. Clara nodded, a smile playing on her lips. "Sounds lovely," she said, her mind racing. She knew them well enough to sense the weight of the words left unsaid. That night, as Clara lay beside Mark, the whispers of the day echoed in her ears. She felt the presence of the unknown between them, a gentle tension that tugged at her curiosity. The whispering wind outside seemed to beckon her towards tomorrow's revelation, towards the precipice of the unexpected. And as she drifted into sleep, she made a silent vow to uncover the mystery, her heart beating to the rhythm of the autumn leaves. The dawn broke with a soft golden hue, filtering through the curtains and casting a warm glow across the bedroom. Clara awoke to the gentle pressure of Mark's hand on her shoulder and the soft murmur of his voice, "Good morning, my love. Today's the day." Clara's eyes fluttered open, and she was greeted with the sight of Mark's smile, a look of excited anticipation dancing in his eyes. "What day?" she inquired, her voice still thick with sleep, though her mind was already racing with thoughts of the plan she had overheard. Mark's grin widened. "The day of our little adventure. Get dressed and pack a bag with your favorite things. Madeline and I have a surprise for you." The word surprise lingered in the air like a melody as Clara rose from the bed. She chose her attire carefully, selecting a comfortable yet chic ensemble that would suit an unknown destination. The atmosphere in the house was electric, charged with a sense of expectation that Madeline seemed to amplify as she fluttered about the kitchen, her usual calm replaced by an almost girlish giddiness. "Clara, Sherry, you must eat something. You'll need your strength for the day ahead," Madeline called out, her voice a sing-song of excitement. Seated at the breakfast table, Clara watched as Madeline laid out an array of pastries and fruits, a feast fit for royalty. The aroma of fresh coffee joined the spread, a comforting constant in the whirlwind morning. "Mark, this all seems so elaborate. Where are we going?" Clara asked, her curiosity piqued as she spread jam over a slice of toast. "You'll see," Mark said, a secretive twinkle in his eye. "Trust me, it's somewhere you've never been before." Madeline chuckled, sliding a plate towards Clara. "It's not the destination, my dear, but the journey that matters." Their cryptic answers did nothing to quell the swirling questions in Clara's mind. She noted the peculiar details, the careful avoidance of specifics, the occasional hushed conversations, the meaningful glances. It all wove a veil of secrecy that Clara was determined to pierce. As they left the house, Clara felt a twinge of apprehension. She was no stranger to Mark's love for surprises, but this was different. There was a gravity to their demeanor that suggested this was more than just a spontaneous day trip. The car ride was filled with laughter and music, a soundtrack that seemed to mock Clara's internal suspense. The landscape blurred past as they drove, not towards the city center or any familiar countryside retreat, but in the direction of open fields and distant hills. "Are we going hiking?" Clara ventured, trying to glean any information from Mark's carefully neutral expression. "No, not hiking," Mark replied, his lips curled in a suppressed smile. "Think higher." "Higher?" Clara echoed, her mind a whirlpool of possibilities. As the car turned into a small private airfield, Clara's breath caught in her throat. The sight that greeted her was one she had never expected, a vibrant hot air balloon, resplendent against the morning sky, waiting like a silent sentinel for its passengers. "We're not just going on any vacation," Mark said, helping Clara out of the car. "We're going up, just the three of us, to celebrate." "Celebrate?" Clara's heart skipped a beat. Her gaze shifted from the balloon to Mark and Madeline, their faces alight with shared joy. The veil of secrecy began to lift, revealing the outline of a truth that Clara had not dared to imagine. And as they walked towards the balloon, every step felt like a move towards a revelation that would change everything. The balloon's woven basket creaked as they settled inside, a snug fit that brought their bodies close together. Clara gripped the edge, her knuckles whitening, as the burner roared to life above them, and the ground began to fall away. Madeline's hand found hers, giving a reassuring squeeze. "Look at us, Clara. Up, up, and away from it all." Madeline's voice was filled with a childlike wonder that made Clara's heart swell. Clara peered over the edge, watching as the airfield became a patchwork quilt beneath them. The world spread out like a canvas, brushed with the golds, reds, and browns of the autumn landscape. The higher they climbed, the more the earth seemed to unfurl below them, revealing its hidden beauty. As they ascended, Mark leaned close, his voice barely above a whisper against the hum of the burner. "Do you remember our first date, Clara? We talked about traveling, about seeing the world from different perspectives." Clara nodded, her eyes locked on the horizon, where the sky melted into a soft blush. "I remember," she said, "you promised me adventures." "And I always keep my promises," Mark replied, his eyes reflecting the sky. "But this is more than just an adventure. It's a celebration. Of us, of our family. The words hung between them, and Clara felt a gentle nudge from Madeline. "He's right, my dear. This is a journey to mark the beginning of something new, something wonderful." As the balloon soared higher, Clara's fear dissolved into the thinning air. The silence of the skies enveloped them, a tranquility that Clara had never experienced. She could hear the soft rustle of her clothing, the steady breaths of her companions, the distant call of a bird below. The world seemed to pause, holding its breath as if in reverence to their passage. Mark broke the silence, his voice full of emotion. "Clara, we're not just floating aimlessly. We're here to share the news that our family is growing. We're going to have a baby." The revelation struck Clara like a sunrise, warm and overwhelming. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she turned to face Mark, the man who had shared with her the depths of his heart. "You knew?" she managed to ask, her voice a mere whisper in the vastness. Mark nodded, a soft smile playing on his lips. "I had my suspicions. Your late-night cravings for pickles and ice cream were a giveaway." Laughter bubbled up from Clara's chest, a release of all the tension she had carried. "And all the secrecy?" "It was Madeline's idea," Mark admitted, gesturing to his mother. "She said it needed to be a surprise worthy of the news." Madeline winked. Every child should be welcomed with joy and love. And what better way than greeting the world from above it? The balloon drifted on, carried by the whims of the wind, a silent sentinel in the vast expanse of blue. The earth below was a reminder of the life that pulsed on, unaware of the small miracle taking place in the heavens. And as Clara gazed into the endless sky, she realized that this moment, this breathless point above the clouds, was a memory etched into the very soul of their budding family. Back on solid ground, the world seemed different to Clara. It was as if the very fabric of her reality had been altered, threaded with new colors of joy and anticipation. The balloon adventure had been a revelation, a glorious celebration in the heavens, but now the gentle rhythm of everyday life resumed its pace. Clara found herself in the kitchen with Madeline, the older woman's hands working deftly as she taught Clara the delicate art of French pastry. The sweet scent of baking dough filled the room, a reminder of the simple, yet profound pleasures of life. Madeline caught Clara's hand gently as she attempted to fold the pastry. "Patience, Clara. It's like weaving threads into a tapestry. Each fold, each crease, tells a story," she instructed, her voice warm and encouraging. Clara smiled, her hands following Madeline's with more care. "I never knew how much work went into these tarts. It's all about the unseen efforts, my dear. The little things that hold everything together," Madeline said, her eyes twinkling with wisdom. As they worked, Madeline began to share stories of Mark's childhood, each tale a thread in the tapestry of his life. Clara listened, enraptured by the image of a younger Mark, painted by his mother's words. "He was always so adventurous, always climbing higher than he should, always looking out to the horizon," Madeline reminisced with a chuckle. "One time, he climbed the big oak out back and declared himself king of the castle." Clara laughed, imagining her husband as a fearless child. "And now, he's taken his wife and mother up in a hot air balloon. Some things never change." "No, they don't. And now, he's preparing for his greatest adventure yet, fatherhood," Madeline said, her voice soft with emotion. The room was filled with more than the aroma of baking. It was filled with love, a deep, unspoken connection between the three of them, interwoven like the layers of the pastry they were preparing. Later, as they sat down to enjoy the fruits of their labor, Mark joined them, his face lighting up at the sight of the golden brown tarts. It smells like heaven in here. You two have outdone yourselves." He took a bite, and his expression was one of pure bliss. "Perfect," he declared, and Clara knew he wasn't just talking about the tarts. That evening, as the sun set, casting long shadows across the yard, Clara and Mark took a walk, their hands entwined. "You know, your mother is an incredible woman," Clara said, squeezing Mark's hand. Mark nodded, his face reflecting the orange glow of the sunset. "She's the thread that's held me together all these years. And now, she's weaving you and our future child into the fabric of our family." Clara leaned her head against Mark's shoulder, feeling the baby move inside her. It was a subtle flutter, like the touch of a butterfly, but it was enough to remind her of the unseen threads, the bonds of family and love, that would soon tie them even closer together. The journey in the hot air balloon had been a symbolic ascent, but the true journey was right here, in the quiet moments and the shared experiences that would define their lives together. In the weeks following their celestial journey, Clara felt a shift within the walls of their home. The air seemed to carry a tender vibrancy, each room echoing with the laughter and shared whispers of family. With Madeline staying with them for a while, the house hummed with a harmonious blend of English and French, the languages weaving around each other like an intimate dance. Clara found herself spending afternoons with Madeline, learning more than just the secrets of perfect pastries. They shared stories, knitting together a bond that was as much about friendship as it was about family. One afternoon, as they sat with cups of tea, Madeline spoke in soft, lilting French. "You know, Clara, language is more than words. It's the silence between the words, the look in the eyes, the hand that reaches out. That's the language of love." Clara nodded, her grasp of the language deepening with every shared moment. "Je comprends," she replied, a smile touching her lips. "I understand. It's the little things, isn't it?" "Oui, exactly," Madeline affirmed. "Like Mark, when he was a boy, he didn't need to say a word. I could see his love in his actions, his excitement in his little jumps, his sadness in the droop of his shoulders." Mark, entering the kitchen at that moment, caught the tail end of their conversation. "Are we talking about the mysterious ways I express my love?" he teased, wrapping his arms around Clara from behind. Madeline laughed, a warm, rich sound that filled the room. "We are discussing the universal language, the one you're quite fluent in, my son." The room resonated with a feeling of unity, a testament to the love that transcended the barriers of different mother tongues. Clara, Mark, and Madeline were creating a shared language, one that was uniquely their own, rich with the nuances of their individual expressions and the collective experiences that brought them together. As Clara's pregnancy progressed, so did her connection with Madeline. They would often sit, hands folded over her growing belly, feeling the baby's movements. No words were needed in these moments, the shared smiles and tears of joy were enough. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Clara whispered, "I used to fear I would always be an outsider in this family because of the language, but I was wrong." Mark, his eyes soft, responded in gentle French, "Love has its own language, and you've been speaking it beautifully since the day we met." Madeline reached out, touching Clara's cheek with a tenderness that bridged any gap words could create. "And now, you are giving us a new voice, a new life to teach and to learn from." In the quiet of the evening, as the sky painted itself in hues of fading light, Clara realized that their love was a language that needed no translation. It was found in the shared glances, the laughter in the kitchen, the protective circle around her belly. It was a language composed of moments and memories, a dialogue of the heart that would continue to grow with the arrival of their child. The language of love was alive in their home, a melody that played in the background of their days, a harmony that promised to guide them through the challenges and joys to come. It was a language that Clara had become fluent in, one that she would soon teach to the newest member of their family. The arrival of spring brought with it a new sense of beginning, the world awaking in a symphony of colors as Clara approached the final weeks of her pregnancy. Inside the nursery, pastel shades adorned the walls, soft blankets lay folded neatly, and a gentle melody from a music box filled the air with lullabies. This room, crafted with love and care, was a physical manifestation of the unseen threads that had woven their lives together. Clara stood in the doorway, Mark beside her, both gazing into the room that would soon echo with the cries and laughter of their child. "Can you believe it, Mark? Our little one will be here any day now," she whispered, her hand resting on the curve of her belly. Mark wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "It feels surreal, doesn't it? From the moment we took to the skies, everything has been leading to this." Their shared reflection was interrupted by Madeline's arrival, her arms laden with a hand-knitted blanket, the result of many evenings spent by the fireside. "For the baby," she said, presenting it to Clara with a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "It's beautiful, Madeline." "You've put so much of yourself into this," Clara replied, running her fingers over the intricate patterns, feeling the love knitted into every stitch. Madeline beamed with pride. "Each thread is a wish for our little one's future, a blessing from my heart to theirs." As they arranged the blanket in the crib, the room seemed to embrace them, the tapestry of their family growing richer and more vibrant. Clara could feel the lineage of love, a lineage that started long before her and would continue long after. "Sometimes, I catch myself wondering what kind of parent I'll be," Clara admitted one evening as they sat in the living room, the baby's imminent arrival a tender topic. Mark took her hand, his touch steady and reassuring. "You'll be an amazing mother, because you love with everything you have. That's all our child could ever need. And you, Mark, will be just as your father was with you," Madeline added, her voice carrying the weight of memories. "Patient, kind, and always ready with a story to tell." They spoke of hopes and dreams, of fears and uncertainties, their words weaving through the air, joining the tapestry of their lives with every sentence spoken. They talked late into the night, not just planning but dreaming, their voices a lullaby of love and expectation. When the day came and Clara held their newborn child for the first time, the threads of their lives bound together in a moment of perfect clarity. Mark stood by her side, his hand gentle on their baby's head, his eyes reflecting the pure joy of a new father. Madeline, now a grandmother, leaned over the crib, whispering words of welcome in soft French, her voice a familiar comfort in the course of new beginnings. As they stood together, a family united, Clara realized that this was the tapestry of life, complex and beautiful, woven from moments of love, fear, joy, and anticipation. It was a tapestry that would continue to grow with each passing day, with every beat of their child's heart, with every breath they took together. In the quiet of the nursery, with the soft light of dawn caressing the room, Clara whispered to her child, "You are the thread that completes us, the piece that makes our tapestry whole." And in the silence that followed, filled only with the soft cooing of their child, the language of love needed no words, for it was felt in every thread, every stitch, every heartbeat within the tapestry of their life.